Welcome to What's Next, previews, predictions, and prognostications. I got the word right today. Thank you very much. Happy Tuesday, or what's today, Wednesday? It's Wednesday, good God. Anyway, I'm your host, Rhett Power. Joining me is my co-host, John Baldoni. What's Next is a show that examines what we do now and where we go to prepare for what's coming in the future. We're going through a tumultuous time in society post-COVID-19. Actually, not even really post-COVID-19. We're seeing the rise of infections grow. We're also going through a lot of social injustice issues. And what we do on this show is we interview thought leaders, doers from the worlds of business, science, medicine, economics, media, and psychology, who will help us get our heads around what the new normal is going to be like. So let's get started with that, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Rhett. It's a pleasure. Our guest today is Eric Schurenberg, who's the CEO of Mansueto Ventures, which is the holding company for iconic media brands, Inc. and Fast Company. Eric has a long legacy of a reporter and editor and a frequent media guest on all the programs from Good Morning America and PBS NewsWire and all kinds of other programs. But he has a unique position in our world of media and also as a CEO because he is running a company, Mansueto Ventures, but he's also linked into, no pun intended, to many CEOs of companies around the world. And particularly Mansueto Ventures is responsible for the Inc. magazine rankings, of which my colleague, Rhett Power, has been honored a couple of times for his business. So it's a big thing. So Eric, welcome to the show. And I'm going to throw a fast one right down the middle to you. So what's it like being a CEO right now in our 3 months into COVID? What's going on?
Well, thank you, John, for having me on. Thank you, Rhett, and congratulations on a ranking that, if I can read it, 259 on the Inc. 500. Congratulations. That is, what was the growth rate that got you there?
1,300%.
Yeah. All right. Over 3 years. That's pretty amazing. That's like neck snapping, we would say. G-force, you could say.
Yes, it was.
So, John, to answer your question about what it's like to be a CEO here, it is sort of like being the proverbial one-armed paper hanger. That it used to be enough to have to worry about cash flow and employee morale and revenues and profits. Now you have to worry about the health of your employees, the sanitation of your office, the risks that your employees take coming to work, as well as to re-examine, if you have any conscience whatsoever, the social justice in this country and the makeup of your own workforce, and to be honest with yourself about your own point of view on those questions and your own point of view on privilege, perhaps, if you're a member of the same ethnic group that I am. So the job, which I thought in the world of publishing could not get any harder, got harder in March and then got harder again a couple weeks ago. I'm not complaining. I still love my job. I still feel like the luckiest CEO on earth to be associated with these two wonderful brands. But there's a lot on the plate right now.
Yeah, and I completely get that. And how, when you look at all the things that you have to do as a CEO, and you've been talking to a lot of people, I'm sure, what are the executives that you're talking to? What are they focused on right now? And what is something? I mean, what should you be focused on right now? Because there are a lot of distractions.
You know, when you get CEOs together, my experience is inevitably they talk about their people. That just always happens. And no matter what business they're in, that's the number one concern. Now, of course, there are so many different ways that you need to take care of your people that you never really had to worry about before. And so that is kind of the number one thing. So if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, security and safety is number one, and it's number one for your employees too. You just want to make sure that people feel good about coming to work, and not only is that important in terms of just kind of humanity and making sure people get there, but your employees want to know that you care about them, and you have to default to the safest possible regimen and be very careful that you're not leaving anyone behind in that regard.
Interesting, Eric, because I've worked with executives in the energy sector and things like that, and one of the paramount concerns for them always is safety of their workers, also in manufacturing. The last thing I would ever think about for a person in your position would be physical safety. And that's excluding journalists, of course, who go into hot zones and war zones and stuff, but for, a business publication. So what's the mind shift going on as far as when I think of safety? What are the questions that go through your mind?
As a CEO, you're always wondering how things will land with your people. There is you have to realize that authenticity, not to seem to stray too far from your question, John, but authenticity can be overrated, and being yourself in a situation can often be misinterpreted and have an effect that's the opposite of what you intended. And and I'm sure you know from talking to the people you coach, that humor can be a dangerous thing for a CEO until people are really used to you. And in this environment where we're thinking not just about the various levels of risk that people feel comfortable with the virus, and with all the political ramifications that have attached themselves to the public health crisis, and with all the sensitivities that need to be addressed and the different perspectives that need to be addressed in the social justice issues that have come to fore in the past couple of weeks. All of that it makes every kind of public address feel a bit like walking through a minefield. And you want to be able to communicate clearly to your people. You want to make your good intentions clear. And my belief is that most people have very good intentions. Most people that I work with or that I've ever met. But the possibilities of misinterpretation are very high. So I spend a lot of my time, I have a town hall tomorrow, I'm spending a lot of my time making sure that the messaging is exactly right.
Yeah, that's important. How do you think, Eric, in a broad sense, maybe it's not a fair question, but how has business changed? And how, with COVID and I think with the social justice issues, all of this coming at one time, and I talked to a lot of CEOs who just hadn't planned for something on like these social issues and this stuff that's happened all at one time, and it's very overwhelming. But how do you think it's going to change leadership and business going forward?
I think it's going to accelerate trends that have been in place already, and I think that statement applies not just to styles of leadership, but also to trends in business. And I'm sure we'll talk about that before the end of this session. But
go ahead, please do.
Well, I will. But let's focus on the leadership bit first. This is old news, but the command and control model of leadership has been extinct, and values like empathy and patience and perspective and things like humility, things like that were, if you wanted to sort of look at them from a particular perspective, that the virtues that were considered feminine even are coming to the fore. And now when people are concerned about their health and are put in situations where there's an enormous amount of stress and change is just kind of being thrust upon us at a really rapid pace. I think that kind of sensitivity is really the mark of a successful leader right now. I just don't think that you can get away with demanding that people throw themselves on their swords and get into work. We can see example after example of how that's just not washing with the general public or with the workforce.
I'm so glad you mentioned authenticity, Eric, because that's actually something I've written about extensively, but I've come to question it too, because what happens if your authentic self is a jerk? So what happens then? And I also do believe, not trying to speak out of both sides of my mouth, that, and this is where I'll throw it to you, leadership is very much an act. And so when you're feeling the pressures that you feel, and I'd like you to address this, how do you, what's the face that you put forward, and how is that authentic for you?
Leadership is an act. It is show business. But and John, I don't know if you know this, but I was way earlier in my life a professional actor. So
did not know.
That kind of what that means in the role of a CEO is pretty close to my heart. And
you and Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, and look what became of him.
When are you launching the campaign, Eric?
Yeah, that's right. Any minute now.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is Ronald Reagan said, in all sincerity, I don't know how anyone could be a president without being an actor. And so, in other words, he knew how to look on camera and in the stage, things like that, and he wasn't being facetious, but that was genuine to him. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, but I mean, we can unpack that statement of Reagan's, because it is really applicable. You have to be able to convey the emotions that you want to convey, and I think that where the acting comes in is in that the emotions you want to convey, you have to select carefully, and they have to be appropriate to the situation, and they often can't be the way you really feel. You cannot let your demons come to the fore, no matter how worried or scared or depressed you are about whatever else is going on in your life, or whatever you think about the business at any particular time. You have to be very careful that you can command demeanor that is confident and optimistic. Doesn't mean you can never admit that you are wrong, or have to pretend that you're infallible, or can't be vulnerable. But you have to have faith in the future of your company, and you have to have confidence and convey confidence in your people, regardless of how you really feel. And the things that are going on in your in the other part of your life, the other parts of your life, you can't let them on stage. They just are not relevant to your job. You have to do your job, and your job is to move the business forward, make your people feel empowered, and that they're doing their best possible work, or at least have the opportunity to do that. And sometimes that means putting what's foremost in your own mind in the back.
So, following up to sort of these trends we started talking about a few minutes ago, in 2000, and we are officially in a recession, I think, as of yesterday. I think I saw that. Mm-hmm. Kind of going back to 2008, we saw in the recession the Great Recession, we saw companies like Uber, and we saw companies like Airbnb come out of that really tough economic time. Are there any industries that you're really excited about? And I hate to use the word excited in this day and time, but I think, are any bright spots or things that you think might emerge that are really interesting to you?
I think that anything that is in the remote workspace enablement field really has a tailwind. Telemedicine, for example, or any kind of remote apps. We have been bombarded with our digital, as we pivot to virtual events, with companies that are building platforms for virtual events. And we all know that the pendulum will swing back a bit to live events again, but probably not all the way. Many of us, and I'm sure many of the people watching this, have discovered that there's a lot to like about the convenience and the accessibility and on-demand, time-shifting convenience of digital events, and they won't forget that when the crisis is over.
Well, since you jumped into this, Eric, let's talk about it, because two of your brands, Fast Company and Inc., are great event producers. So how are you shifting, and what are you seeing so far? We're very early into this, but what do you want to say about it?
Actually, I'd add to it, what's going to make a good digital event too?
I think that what will make a good digital event, Rhett, is the event's ability to tap into the emotions and experiences that make a live event so exciting, and at the same time capture the convenience and scalability that make a digital event so inviting as a business proposition, and also as a thing that's easy to attend. So I've seen a number of visions of how this could work out, and the difficult thing is to not commit the same mistake that early television made. If you could heard this metaphor before of setting up a camera at row 6 in a theater and just turning it on and watching a stage play with that. Yeah, so you have to take advantage of the medium, but you also, I think, want to make people feel that this is familiar. That this is like the event I expected. It's like the experience I hope to go to. It permits the networking and serendipitous meetings that I come to like about live events, and gives me an approximation of the personality of the presenters and hosts, and captures all that stuff. At the same time, has lots of whiz bang, razzle dazzle that is only available in a digital environment. Avatars and virtual environments and things like that just can make you glad that you actually are sitting in your office watching it rather than sitting in a chair in a theater or in a ballroom.
I want to shift a little bit towards the media and the crisis that we're going through in this country and worldwide. But do you think the media has done a good job of covering COVID and covering the social justice issues? And how is Inc. and how are Fast Company? What is the approach to covering this news?
I am. Look, I'm a longtime journalist, so I am on team media. I really believe in media being essential to a democracy.
Absolutely.
I've seen newsrooms at work, and I see how hard editors work to make sure things are factual.
Right.
So I would, I think the caveat that you always have to bring up when you talk about media these days is that you have to distinguish between news and opinion, and people don't, and therefore conclude that they can't be sure that whatever they're reading is not totally biased. I think that if you're aware of what's news and what's opinion, then you can pretty well pick out the the still remaining biases in the news.
Sure.
So I would say that the media have done a good job, and in the sense that everybody is now pretty much very quickly aware of, let's say, the paths of infection from COVID-19. And I think sort of almost everybody, when you exchange tips and wisdom with your friends, it's pretty much everyone saying the same thing. So there's a lot of agreement about that. And I think that the partisanship that is now part of the atmosphere where we in this country has become regrettably tangled up with the public health crisis, and that makes it difficult because different publications view the world through very different partisan lenses.
Right.
But there are lots of stories I've seen on CNN or read in the Washington Post or the New York Times that also have made their ways into Fox News, and about about maintaining health and about the desirability of people to work together to cure the disease and to support both police and social justice. So there is, even in this divided time, if you look in the right places in the media, that spine of core American beliefs that is being conveyed.
Eric, I want to address, because you mentioned health, and the other aspect. We've had our last week's show, we had Dr. Julie Rosenberg and Dr. Anna Yusim, who are dealing both. Julie is an oncologist, but also a yoga practitioner. And the reason I mention that is because she's very aware of mental health, and Anna Yusim is a psychiatrist. So, from your perspective as a CEO, how are you addressing, or what would you counsel CEOs about the mental health stress, perhaps, of your colleagues, of your employees? Any words on that?
Well, I think that one of the outcomes of this crisis is that a trend to accept mental health issues as legitimate health issues, which was already gaining momentum, just accelerated. Everyone is under stress, and it's not a great leap for a CEO to say, we want you to be healthy and avoid infection, and we want you to be healthy and take care of your mental state as you adapt to this extraordinary challenge. So I think that in that sense, I'm hardly alone, and the conversations I've had with CEOs, to me, suggest that everyone is aware of that. So what we have done at Mansueto Ventures is what I hear a lot of fellow CEOs doing. So we encourage people to take time off, remind people to take time off, because it's so easy to just, when you're working from home, to just keep working. And I've encouraged my leadership team to make sure that message is conveyed to everyone who works at Mansueto Ventures. We bought everybody a subscription to Calm. They can meditate if they so choose. And the uptake on Calm usage has been relatively minor. The message was well received.
I can imagine.
That's a good point, actually, Eric, because what you've done is you've made it safe for people to at least address the issue, certainly on the surface of stress, but also if there are other deeper concerns. And I liked your explicit thing. We reminded people to take time off because, as you rightly said, if you're working from home, well, your quote already kicking back, which of course we know is not the truth. So.
Yes, that is totally true.
Eric, I don't know if you've talked to people about this, but I wanted your take on it. A lot of people that I'm talking to are really thinking about making a sort of a permanent move to remote work, really shifting their whole footprint. I was talking to a CEO that's in New York City, and he said, we may just go to a smaller office with a much smaller office with a few hot desks, and just send everybody home and let's work remote. Do you think that that's premature to make those kind of shifts? Or, because to me, that's going to be a really hard cultural change in an organization.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rhett. I don't know where we'll go with it. And we will definitely be feeling our way through the next few months after the return to the office, whatever that means. That a number of prominent companies like Twitter and Facebook have said essentially that if you like working at home, you can stay at home.
Yeah.
And my take on that is that was kind of part of the culture at those companies already. That
right.
I imagine that it was never really difficult to work from home at a company like that, where the nature of their work is so easily transportable over the wire. But what is missing from that is the creative accidents that happen from friction in
right.
the office. And I don't mean like emotional
right.
friction in the bad sense, but just the clash of ideas and the cross fertilization of people's different points of view that don't happen if you schedule a Zoom meeting, line up for a Zoom meeting, and then take turns talking one at a time on a Zoom screen. I think one of the surprises of the crisis era is that those platforms actually work pretty well for a lot of meetings, but do they work well enough is another question. And then I think another question that you'll have to contend with as the leader of a company is, how do you prevent, if you have a huge segment of your workforce now suddenly choosing not to commute and work from home, how do you prevent a kind of hierarchy of an in-group and an out-group of people who are there at the boss's elbow, available to have those serendipitous hallway meetings, and there are some people who are not, the technology can freeze some people out, and so these are difficult questions.
Eric, great. I'm so glad you mentioned this. I actually did a piece on this about the virtual office space, and eventually we will probably have a hybrid workforce, some in the office, some at home. And you rightly hit the issue, because proximity to power has always been an avenue of being promoted, and then, if we look at our expat employees who were, spent 3 years abroad, it's often a tough readjustment for when they come back to home office, because you've been gone for 3 years, stuff like that, even though they're working for the company. So how do, that's a great question that for you as a CEO to explore, is how do we ensure inclusion in that?
Yeah.
I'll toss that to you. Yeah.
One technique that I will give a try once we come back and are on unequal footing between proximity to each other and remote work, is that if someone in the meeting is remote, then everyone has to log into the meeting via Zoom.
I like that
you've kept equality among everybody, and no one has an advantage just for being able to sit next to the boss.
I heard you mention something when you spoke to us, Eric, Eric was on a talk with our colleagues at Marshall Goldsmith 100. You talked about even when we get back to the office, we will be using virtual tools.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yes, that's right, and that is because we won't be able to keep socially distant in a number of instances. I'm sure you can supply many from your own experience in which the office was too crowded, or if you can't have more than 3 people or two people in an office. Two people is probably the maximum at my shop. How can you do the work that you're used to doing? You would have to do it all virtually, even if you're sitting in your office, and that will be a cultural change that will take some getting used to for sure.
So I have a question from social media. First, Robbie Vetrano says, "Hi, Eric." But Manash asks, "Are there any success stories that your reporters or your staff have written about that you found really interesting through coming out of COVID?" Or I think that's probably what he.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, hi to Robbie. I hope everything's going well for him down in New Orleans. He's a great entrepreneur, and I would expect that his business is pretty strong in the middle of all this. Let me draw your attention to the cover story of this issue of Inc. For example, the company is called Everlywell. The CEO is Julia Cheek, and the company previously, it was a venture-backed company, and the company previously did home diagnostic tests for a number of illnesses, and they realized that they could pivot to diagnostic tests for COVID, even though they had no experience with that particular disease, and the tests were not, the functionality wasn't designed for that. But they figured this was not only a business opportunity, but it was a moral imperative. And even though the economics were unclear, the CEO, Julia, went to the board and got $1 million to recalibrate their manufacturing facilities and began producing tests within a very short amount of time. So that's an example, I think, of the entrepreneurial spirit, of agility and courageous leadership. I'm very happy with that story.
I'm glad you mentioned that entrepreneurial, because that's the foundation certainly of Inc., but also the social and social and tech trends in Fast Company. So I'll throw out you a softball question. How is entrepreneurism going to help lead the way? What thoughts might you have on that, Eric?
Well, entrepreneurship always leads the way. I love the quote from Peter Drucker that says, whenever you see a successful company, you know that somebody at some point made a courageous decision. The definition of entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship would not exist if people were not solving problems, if they were not making the world a better place, and didn't believe that lay within their powers, or else you would never take that kind of risk or do that kind of impose that kind of work and burden on yourself unless you really felt like
amen to that.
I can see Rhett laughing and he goes, "Why did I do this?" But I guess
oh yeah, that's why I just admire entrepreneurs so much.
I always have my favorite thing about entrepreneurs. They, and I say this respectfully, they do not understand the meaning of the word no. And I think in our times, adversity, that's their milieu. So,
well, I've always said, I think entrepreneurs have to be a little delusional. They have to be you have to be a little nuts, I think, to do it.
Yes, you do. You do. You have to have a really flimsy grasp of the statistics arrayed against you to imagine that, yes, I am going to be in the 5% of companies that survives to its 5th year, and I'm going to be the one who is going to overcome the incredible odds.
You have to avoid those odds. Those odds don't even.
They don't apply to me.
Then I'll throw this. Actually, I could even ask Rhett or Eric, what lessons of entrepreneurship can Fortune 500 companies take from it? What could they take from it?
There was one really seminal study that Inc. did a few years ago of the Inc. 5000 honorees. And as Rhett well knows, Inc. 5000 honorees are the fastest growing private companies in America that we've been able to identify at Inc. So over the previous 3 years, we accept applications from people who've had fantastic growth rates, vet those growth rates, and then introduce those people to the public. And the Gallup group had done a survey of business people in general, and we asked them to give that same survey, that same test to the Inc. 5000 honorees. And the survey was meant to, by asking you a bunch of kind of misdirection questions, to find out what kind of traits you had. And the question was meant to ferret out, traits that you think would be traits of a successful business person. So salesmanship and relationship building and determination and things like that. And it found that the Inc. 5000 honorees were significantly, 4 or 5 times higher on a number of traits compared to business people in general. And the 3 that stood out most of all were willingness to take risk, so guts, determination and unwillingness to give up, and focus on the business. So guts, grit, and focus, if you will. So those things are heavily correlated, according to this study, with highly successful, high growth entrepreneurs. And I think that those same characteristics can serve you really well as an entrepreneur inside a business. It takes guts to see an idea through inside a big organization. Certainly takes determination to do that. And it takes focus on the results and the paths, the key results that you need to take to get to that goal.
And John, I can't answer that question because I never really functioned well inside a big organization. So that's why I became an entrepreneur.
The reason I asked the question and you answered it, well, thank you, Eric, is insightful, is because in times of crisis, and we've got a triple whammy right now, economic, social, and health, you will need, we will need talent at either be an entrepreneurial venture, or more especially in a proven adventure, a Fortune 500 company. They will be needing to look for talent of people who are, as you said, willing to take risks, but also think differently, out of the box. And that's what I'll toss it to you, is what kind of, what's the next generation of employees going to look like coming up? Our millennials, what are we looking for?
Well, I think we're looking for those traits, and but also I think that what millennials have that my generation did not have, I think, is a broad point of view and a willingness to accept different perspectives. They were raised in an atmosphere in which their peer group, the images that they see in media are more diverse, and there is, I think, a greater premium put on tolerance, and that, I think, is a crucial component in creativity, because in creativity, it doesn't happen unless you're exposed to different ideas, and sort of the hinge on which creativity seems to work is when you can blend different things together and come up with something that's better than the sum of the parts.
So I've got a question from Maggie on social as well. Thanks, Maggie, for contributing today. She asked, I guess it's hard to read, changes at Inc. or Fast Company that you're excited about, events this year that you're doing? Has COVID changed the business model or in the business thinking at Inc. and Fast Company? Yeah.
A key one is that the big events that we do in the fall, the Fast Company Innovation Festival and the Inc. 5000 conference, will be 100% virtual this year. And that opens up all kinds of opportunities, I think. And if we do it right, it also carries a lot of risk and uncertainty, and we're feeling our way through. But that's all very exciting, and I'm really proud of the team for how they've embraced the challenge and are bringing that new platform home. Another change that amounts to an acceleration of a direction that I wanted us to go already is that we will evolve Inc. and Fast Company from being simply, to use a metaphor from my previous career, from a proscenium stage in which the authorities, the editors and writers, stand and deliver content outwardly, to an arena stage in which there's participation with the community who contribute to giving ideas to the editors, who give ideas and help to each other. And the role of the brands then is not to be merely the authority who's pontificating about this subject or telling that story, but a facilitator of helping entrepreneurs or creative business people at Fast Company help each other get ahead.
Are you doing anything with live video and anything with those platforms? Are you making a move to do more of that?
Yes. We in the first week after we left the office, so in the middle of March, we partnered with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to do a live webinar series for interpreting the CARES Act. So how to get a PPP loan and how to make sure that if you did get a loan, it would be forgiven, and all that kind of difficult, complicated government rigmarole. And, we didn't know if anyone would show up. Previously, a webinar was a rollicking success if 300 people showed up. There were 12,000 registrants. So this event that had been flung together hastily because we knew our readers needed it, and we had this healthy partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, became the biggest single event we had ever done.
That's incredible. What does that tell you? Anything that you have to do more of those?
Well, it tells you that digital events are more scalable. It tells you that the brand Inc. is a place that people turn, that entrepreneurs turn when they have pressing questions. And that was really validating for us.
Fantastic.
I wanted to ask, just before we close here, Eric, what's your prediction for 2021 or even 2022? Where are we going to be work-wise?
Boy, that is, I'm so terrible at predictions. The good thing about it is that when you make them, no one remembers. Yeah. So the real key is just to say whatever you're going to say with conviction. I think that 2021 will be a consolidation period, that we will be digesting the changes that have been thrust upon us by this, these tremendous forces unleashed. And we'll begin to see those companies that Rhett mentioned earlier, and you too, John. So we'll begin to see who the Ubers and the Amazons were that emerged from the ashes of this recession. And I made an easy prediction that telemedicine or remote working applications would be successful companies, and probably but there will also be surprises that we never thought of, that will be ramifications of the trends that emerge from this, or the trends that were previously existed, and that these events accelerated. One thing that I have always thought was interesting. Now, travel is going to be hamstrung for a while, but at the same time, people will want to go places, and they might be willing to go places with small groups that they trust, that can be monitored for their health, and that give them a sense of community and purpose that that you don't get from say a guided tour of Paris or China. And I think that kind of mindfulness vacation might be a really interesting business in 2021 and beyond.
I went, I did just to talk about that a little bit. I did an Airbnb experience the other night with my kids, and we went to Chernobyl. And
wow.
And this guy goes into the Chernobyl site, and it's feeding the dogs of Chernobyl. I guess there are a lot of stray dogs in Chernobyl. And they go in, they show you the site, you take a tour of the whole Chernobyl site, and it was fascinating, right? And I mean, I wouldn't have thought about. I got introduced to it through a friend, but we've gone now to lots of different places that we would normally love to travel to, but aren't going to get to for a while, just to sort of get that, I guess, to escape for a little while. But you're on Zoom. It's on your own camera. You're talking to the tour guide. It's interactive. There are questions and answers, and you're not there, but you're there. And I thought that was a really creative way to sort of take people out of where they are. We've been home for 4 months now. So,
wow, well, that's really interesting, Rhett. Wow, that sounds fun.
So just a great experience and a little vacation at home. But I think as that technology gets there, that's going to be even more of a thing. I think it's a lot of opportunity there. But this has been fantastic, Eric. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, Eric, you've been a terrific guest, and you've given us perspectives from your own point of view, but also you've shared the points of view from other folks, your fellow CEOs and business entrepreneurs that you know very well. And we thank you, and that's what's next is all about, exploring what our new normal will be. And it'll be people like Eric Schurenberg who help us define it. So thank you.
John, Rhett, it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.